Pick up the rag, little immigrant, or I'll buy your silence. 5 words, then a hush. The crystal flute slipped, struck marble, and shattered like ice under a boot. Sound jumped off the chandelier's gold ribs, ricocheted through the Starlight Grand's atrium, and died in the velvet air. She did not look up. Alicia Torres pressed the rag to a pale crescent of spilled champagne. Her hand trembled, not from fear, but from the ache you feel when a room refuses to see you. The mop bucket mirrored her face in a wobbled oval. Tired eyes, neat bun, badge clipped to a gray tunic that smelled like lemon and steel. Past midnight, the lobby was a stage set for the wealthy. Cobalt carpet, a piano asleep under its cover, a desk of black stone that reflected everything above it and nothing below. The ceiling was a sky you couldn't touch, scattered with cold stars and a chandelier so bright it bruised. "Did you hear me?" The voice returned, colder now. "Faster." Alicia straightened and reached for the mop. No apology, no argument. Just motion, clean and exact. She had learned this tempo years ago, when staying employed required not offering the world your opinion. The floor accepted the glide of her head, the bend of her back, the quiet of her mouth. On the far side of the lobby, 3 men in trimmed suits circled a glass table. Ties loosened. "Watch is loud!" They spoke in half-laughs, the way men do when the bill is already paid. One poured fresh armagnac. Another filmed the chandelier, framing it for someone who wasn't invited. The third turned, watching her. He was tall. Charcoal suit. No name tag. A face that had forgotten what waiting felt like. He carried nothing because everything carried itself to him. His cufflinks flashed a little crown with 3 points. For a second, the light found them and held on. "Sir?" The concierge ventured gently. "We close the lounge at 1. The tall man didn't answer. He was studying the woman with the rag, studying the little girl seated on a housekeeping cart, bare feet tucked beneath a folded towel, coloring a building with a dull blue crayon. Sophia. 6 years old, hair like a question mark when the night is humid. She glanced up, searching for her mother's face, and then slid the crayon back and kept drawing windows. Row after row, a tower in a child's grip, made of rectangles and hope. "Employees' children don't belong on display," the tall man said finally, not loud, precise, the kind of voice that sets prices. "Rules are rules." Alicia swallowed the dry taste of bleach and spoke softly. "Sophia will not disturb anyone, sir. I have 2 more suites. We'll be gone before 1. The man stepped closer, shoes whispering over the carpet. The chandelier stitched light across his jaw. "You're already past midnight." "It was a double shift," she answered. "We are short." He smiled without warmth, the smile of someone who is never short. "Then work as if you understand what short costs." His fingers hooked the edge of the mop handle. He didn't take it. He only made her feel his hand on the tool that fed her child. The concierge turned away. The pianist pretended to adjust the cover. The air puckered. "Sir," Alicia said, the word almost a breath, "please do not touch my—" The handle cracked against the marble column. The bucket rocked. Lemon water slipped free and slid toward Sophia's shoe. "Clean it," he said. Sophia flinched. Her heels smudged the blue crayon line so the tower bled into sky. Alicia kneeled, blotting the spill with quick, practiced circles. Her movements had the choreography of a person who knows there will be another mess in 5 minutes, and another man who believes he is allowed to make it. "Look at me," the tall man said. She did. He was closer now. Close enough to see a faint scar at his temple. The kind a childhood fall leaves when money arrives too late to erase it. He held her gaze as if it were an object he owned. "Do you know who I am?" "I know who you are here," she said. "A guest." "Not a guest." He leaned in, voice lower. "A standard." The word landed like a price tag. Sophia set the crayon down. "Mama?" "It's all right," Alicia said without looking away from the man. "Keep drawing, mi amor." A pair of investors drifted down the steps from the mezzanine, their laughter dampened by the carpet. One of them, pale and tired, caught the scene and stalled, as if he'd walked into a photograph he would rather not be in. The other watched openly, a tourist of small humiliations. "You're bleeding." the pale one murmured. It was true. A thin cut crossed the back of Alicia's wrist where the mop handle had struck. She hadn't noticed. She had been busy being efficient. "Do you require medical?" the concierge asked, voice barely audible. The tall man answered for her. "She requires clarity." He took a black card from his pocket. "Not a credit card, a key. No logo, no number. Just matte weight and a chip that winked once like an eye that never slept." He flipped it between his fingers, then placed it on the stone desk. It did not clatter. It arrived. The concierge straightened instinctively. "Make it shine before the board arrives," the tall man said, still watching Alicia. "All of it. Board?" the pale investor echoed. "Tonight?" The tall man did not blink. Standards prefer surprise. He pivoted, and the three suits moved with him like tide following moon. Past the sleeping piano, past the elevator bank whose screens reflected men in suits and erased the woman kneeling. The doors opened with a polite sigh. They stepped into their own private quiet and went up. The lobby exhaled. Alicia rinsed the rag. Sophia whispered numbers as she counted windows. 32, 33. She added a moon. The chandelier hummed. Outside, the avenue cooled. Cabs drifted. A night bus slowed at the corner, sighed, and continued. Somewhere, a bottle backfired, and some dog decided it was insulted. Then a breath. Then the sound that breaks rooms and wakes neighbors. "Please help my mama," Sophia cried, voice tiny and enormous at once. "They're hurting her." It was not loud. It was right-sized for truth. It threaded through the chandelier's light like a stitch, found the seam of the door, and slipped into the street. Engines, somewhere far, answered. Or it was thunder, or it was the city remembering what it was built for. The concierge looked at the door and then at the mop and then at the woman and the child. He did not move. The chandelier kept burning with the kind of light that doesn't warm anyone who cleans under it. In its reflection, three men rose in an elevator toward a floor where windows had no fingerprints. In its reflection, a woman pressed a cloth to a skin-thin wound and refused to give the room her tears. Sophia's drawing now had a crack of dark blue sliding down the tower. It looked like rain. It looked like a vein. "Mi amor," Alicia said, voice steady. "Breathe." They both did, and the room listened, because breath, like justice, makes its own acoustics. She stood, wrist wrapped in paper towel, and lifted the bucket. The wheels squeaked. The floor gleamed where she had been. It always did. Somewhere above, a door closed with a soft, arrogant click. Sometimes the first fall is only a rehearsal for the reveal. Sometimes the person asking if you know who he is telling you exactly who he will be when the lights are brighter. Alicia pushed the cart forward. The rag dripped once, a single silver tear on stone, and then stopped. The lobby returned to beautiful. The kind of beautiful that breaks late when nobody is watching and never apologizes for how much it costs. They had arrived at dusk, when the starlight's glass turned the sky to crushed violets and smoke. Alicia swiped in through the service entrance, where the hotel is honest about itself, pipes exposed, paint practical, clock set 5 minutes fast. 2 carts were missing. 2 women called out sick. It meant 4 floors for 1 pair of hands. She took the keys and folded the form the way she always did, small enough to hide inside the palm, small enough to pretend the list was shorter. Sophia skipped over the threshold and stopped skipping when she saw her mother's eyes. "Quiet feet," Alicia said gently. "Quiet like cats," Sophia whispered, and set her heels down on the softest part of the hallway runner. She carried a book and a pencil and the kind of patience children barter for time with their mothers. On the 4th floor, a door hung open, offering a private kingdom. A lounge rendered in whale gray and midnight blue, a counter of 2 white stone, a bowl of pears that didn't smell like pears. Alicia laid a towel on the counter and placed her daughter's book there. "Only here," she said. "If I'm not in the room, you're on the towel, promise." "Promise," Sophia said, and meant it. The phone on Alicia's hip buzzed. She checked the screen. Unknown number. She let it ring into silence. It rang again. She answered. "Torres," she said, the name formed like a guardrail. A baritone filled the tiny speaker. It wasn't loud. It filled space by refusing to hurry. Make it shine before midnight, the voice said. All of it. Who is this? Standards don't introduce themselves. The line went dead. She stared at the wall for a beat, then returned the phone to her pocket and set a new speed in her body. Dust, glass, chrome, mirror. She worked in circles. She worked until the sound of her own breathing became background. On the second suite, she found glitter in the carpet and sighed, not because she resented the celebration, but because glitter is a rumor that never stops telling itself. At 9, Sophia's book became a drawing. At 9:30, her drawing became a tower. By 10, the tower had windows with tiny yellow squares for light. Alicia misted the bar and buffed the rings to ghost. Can we go home before the moon sleeps? Sophia asked. We will try. What if the moon doesn't sleep? Then we'll be braver than the moon, Alicia said. She meant it. She kept moving. At 10:15, the elevator delivered a tray nobody had ordered. Oysters under pearls of ice. A bottle whose label was less a word than a posture. Alicia signed for it because saying no to a delivery is how arguments begin when arguments can cost you rent. She carried the tray to the mezzanine, past a wall of framed faces. Founders. Partners. Men who would live forever in these rectangles. There were no nameplates, just signed photographs and dates. The oldest black and white showed 3 boys standing in front of a storefront made of cheap brick and bright belief. The newest showed men in suits in front of windows that made the city look like something they owned. Alicia wiped a smudge from the glass over the newest picture. The middleman wore a tie the color of a fresh bruise. His cufflinks were small crowns with 3 points. His eyes looked like they knew the answer to every question you would never be allowed to ask. The badge on Alicia's hip pinged softly. A system update. Tiny text marched across the screen. Vanguard Holdings, Access Control Sync, 0015. She frowned. Vanguard, not Starlight. Corporate above the hotel. She had only seen that name on HR emails that began with, as a reminder, and ended with failure to comply. She looked down the hallway. Nobody there. She tapped the badge against the bronze elevator panel. The reader blinked green. The door slid open. She glanced at Sophia, settled on the towel, tongue peeking out as she colored a moon. Stay, Alicia said. Like cats, Sophia answered, not looking up. Alicia stepped in. The elevator smelled like cool metal and the kind of flowers that never wilt. Buttons gleamed in 2 columns. Floors 1 through 40 in simple numerals. Above them, a narrow row marked S1, S2, and then a slim keyhole. Her badge was not a key. It was still green. She pressed nothing. Doors closed. Time stalled. On the panel's black glass, her face floated, faint, capable, and threaded with the fatigue of someone who counts tips in miles and miles in minutes. Behind her reflection, a ghost of letters drifted like fish. Sky Lounge, Board Prep, Private. She breathed once, long and quiet, and stepped back out before curiosity could become trouble. At 11, the night changed color. Wealth arrived late, with the rumble of tires that didn't like potholes. Men stepped from cars that warmed themselves. Shoes clicked. Laughter coiled. Alicia stood at the angle where she could be useful without being noticed, and watched the rules assemble themselves without a vote. He came last. Charcoal suit. Scar at the temple, small as a misplaced comma. Crown cufflinks. The same man from the frame. The same voice from the call. He did not sign the ledger. He looked at Alicia the way people look at elevators when they don't want to use the stairs. Clean faster, he said, not bothering to make it sound like a request. Or I'll remind you what you're worth, he walked on. Carrying the room with him, Sophia's pencil paused in the air. Alicia nodded once toward the book, and Sophia resumed the moon. Midnight came as a threshold, thin and sharp. The hotel shifted into the kind of silence that knows secrets. Doors closed gently. Music retreated to expensive headphones. Somewhere, a woman laughed softly, as if she had been told to laugh softly. Alicia wiped a counter and found a fingerprint that refused to leave. She pressed harder. It smeared, then glowed. Some prints never go. They're the story the surface tells when nobody's listening. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She answered because she wanted the night to be finished and the world to be simple. Torres, she said. Make it shine, the baritone repeated. Before the board arrives. You called already. Standards echo, he said, and hung up. She set the phone down and felt heat at the back of her eyes. She blinked it into obedience. On the towel, Sophia drew a second tower beside the first, so the moon would have company. The concierge rang her extension. Ms. Torres, he said. There's a spill in the atrium. I'm already here, she said, and was. The scene unfolded the way it always does when a room believes it's entitled to a show. A glass on marble, a rag in a woman's hand. A man asking questions he answers with his posture. In one of the mezzanine mirrors, the moment repeated itself, thinner and meaner like a rumor. Then the part that does not always happen. Sophia stood. Her feet touched cold stone. She stepped off the towel. She walked to the lip of the lobby, small and straight-backed, a rectangle of paper held in both hands like it mattered. The security camera above the elevator blinked red, patient as a clock. Mama, she said. Alicia looked up. The tall man did not. Sophia folded her drawing and clutched it to her chest. She took a breath large enough for two bodies and spoke in a voice so honest it resisted echo. Please help my mama, she said. They're hurting her. The concierge closed his eyes. The pianist lifted the cover an inch, then set it down again. The night doorman, who had been studying the weather through the glass, finally saw the room he was in. Outside, the avenue listened. A low thrum rolled across the asphalt from somewhere you do not look unless you need something fast. Engines. 3, maybe 4. A sound like thunder if thunder wore leather. The tall man glanced toward the doors, then up toward the mezzanine where a camera cut the lobby into squares. His mouth tightened. He said nothing. Sophia turned toward the entrance and took 2 steps. Sophia, Alicia said, voice calm. Wait. But the child did not wait. She ran, bare feet on stone, paper clenched in a fist. The chandelier hurled light in long spears that did not touch her. The doorman fumbled the lock. The door opened. Night air took her small face in both hands and kissed it cold. The engines came closer. Sometimes a cry is not a question. Sometimes it is a road flare. Sometimes the street answers in chrome and noise because words are too slow. Alicia set the rag down. The mop handle stood upright a moment, then tipped, then settled. She put her hand against the cut on her wrist and watched the door swing once, twice, 3 times before it settled into a new reality. The tall man exhaled, as if bored. Standards, he said to no one. Attract theatrics. He collected his key and turned toward the elevator. The elevator opened as if it had been listening the entire time. Upstairs, the Sky Lounge waited with glass that never showed fingerprints and chairs that never squeaked. A table had been set for men who do not read menus. A window had been cleaned twice because someone said the city looked smudged. The badge on Alicia's hip glowed green. Again. Standards echo. She wiped the last. Crescent of champagne and caught her reflection in the marble. Not the face of a victim. The face of someone who has learned to fold a night into hours, and hours into decisions, and decisions into survival. She lifted the bucket. On the door, the brass letters spelled the hotel's name as if it were a prayer. The street outside spelled something else. Sometimes the worst thing a room can do is underestimate the person cleaning it. Sometimes the reveal has already begun, and nobody in the chandelier knows. If you believe kindness can still cut through marble and money, stay with us to see what arrives when engines meet glass. The phone rang once, then again, and then it wouldn't stop. Alicia let it buzz against the stainless sink until its vibration became part of the hum of the vents above her head. When she finally picked it up, the air in the staff corridor felt colder. Torres, she said. The voice came through steady, rehearsed. You're still there? Yes, sir. Finishing the top floor suites? Not enough, he replied. Make it shine before the board arrives. I'm on my way. The line went dead, leaving only the click of her pulse. For a long second, she stared at the reflection on the steel panel. her own face split by the seam of the elevator doors. She could hear Sophia humming somewhere near the mop cart, a lullaby half learned in Spanish and half invented by a child who thought songs could keep the night from changing. Alicia wiped her palms on her apron and tried to steady her breath. It wasn't fear of the man's return. It was the knowing. How a voice like his never arrived without something to prove. Upstairs, beyond the mezzanine, the private elevator shaft stirred. The whir of cables sounded like a whisper crawling through metal. She could almost time his descent. "Come on, sweetheart," she called softly. "Pack your crayons? We're nearly done." Sophia nodded, small and obedient, clutching her sketchbook. The last drawing was still damp with blue, 2 towers, 1 moon. They were wiping the marble trim when the door slid open. He stepped out with the confidence of someone who had never been asked to wait. Behind him came 2 men and a woman, their laughter sharp, their jackets tailored too tightly for empathy. The tall man's eyes swept the hall and found her instantly. "Still here. Yes, sir." The mezzanine needed extra polishing. "I told you midnight," he said. "It's 12:15. "I know, sir." "Then you also know what that means." He took a slow sip from the glass in his hand and set it on the counter without looking where it landed. Amber liquor sloshed over the rim, spreading like a bruise. "Clean it." She reached for the towel. The glass toppled. Shards scattered, one slicing across her palm. She hissed under her breath and pressed her hand to her apron. "Watch your step," one of the guests muttered. The tall man's smile barely moved. "Accidents happen. Right, Torres?" Alicia bent to gather the pieces. "Yes, sir." He crouched slightly, enough to lower his voice. "You work here because I allow it. Remember that when you start bleeding on my floors." Sophia's small voice cracked the tension. "Mama?" The man turned toward the child. "You bring her here again?" Alicia stood quickly, shielding Sophia with her body. "She waits quietly. There's no one to stay with her at home." "Not my concern." He gestured toward the doorway. One of his guests chuckled, uneasy. "Maybe let it go, Rich." The tall man raised a hand, silencing him. His eyes, 2 polished stones, locked on Alicia. "You embarrassed me last week in front of investors. I won't have a repeat. I didn't mean—" "Don't explain." His tone cut through her apology like glass through cloth. "Just do what you're told." He stepped closer until the scent of cologne drowned the smell of bleach. "You think I don't see you? You think I don't notice when people start believing they deserve more than they earn?" Alicia stayed still. "I only do my job." "Then do it faster." He shoved the mop handle into her hands. The impact sent a pulse of pain through her cut palm. The bucket rocked, spilling gray water across the marble. Sophia gasped. "Stop yelling at my mama!" The lobby went silent. Every sound, the hum of lights, the tick of a clock, folded into stillness. The man blinked once, surprised by the defiance, then smirked. "Your mama?" Sophia's lip trembled, but she didn't step back. "You're mean." He took a step forward, looming. "This is not a playground." "Get her out!" Alicia's voice shook. "She's a child." "Then teach her manners." He turned away as if dismissing both of them from existence. But something in his movement, too abrupt, too hard, brushed against the mop. The handle snapped. Alicia staggered, landing on one knee. The broken wood clattered across the floor. "Please," she whispered. "You're hurting me." He didn't answer. His face was unreadable, carved from something expensive and empty. Sophia's scream split the corridor. It wasn't a word, just sound, high and clean, like glass breaking a second time. She ran, bare feet slapping marble, breath hitching, heart hammering through the hall. The doorman froze as she tore past him, a flash of blue dress and tears. Alicia scrambled to her feet. "Sophia!" But the child was gone, swallowed by the revolving door and the wide, indifferent street beyond. The tall man exhaled through his nose. "Now look what you've done." Alicia turned on him, trembling, blood bright against her wrist. "You did this." For the first time, his mask cracked. "Watch your tone." Down the corridor, one of the guests muttered, "Enough, Richard." The name hung in the air. Richard. He straightened his tie. "You all forget who pays for this building?" Then the distant growl of engines rose from the avenue, low, synchronized, alive. Richard's jaw tightened. "Security?" No one answered. The sound grew louder, closer. Not cars, motorcycles. Alicia's pulse matched the rhythm, steady, growing, unstoppable. Justice doesn't always walk through doors. Sometimes it roars through them. And this night, the city was listening. If you've ever known what it feels like to be unheard, stay close, because the next sound you hear might be the one that changes everything. The first vibration reached the floor before the sound did, a slow pulse through marble. Subtle at first, then steady, heavier. Engines, multiple, moving in unison. The chandelier above the Starlight Grand trembled, its crystals chiming like wind against glass. Richard turned toward the entrance, the look of a man unaccustomed to surprises. "What the hell is that?" he muttered. The concierge stammered. "It sounds like—" "Don't tell me what it sounds like," Richard snapped. "Handle it," but no one moved. The automatic doors shuddered open as 3 motorcycles rolled to a halt outside the lobby's steps, their headlights cutting through the rain-slicked street. Engines idled low like growling beasts waiting for a command. Alicia stood still, one hand on her bleeding wrist, the other holding the broken mop handle. Her eyes darted from the doors to the man beside her. Sophia was somewhere out there, in the cold, near those lights. The lead rider swung off his bike, a tall man in a black leather jacket, patches worn thin, tattoos dark against his neck. Rain clung to his shoulders like armor. His helmet came off with deliberate calm. "Who the hell are you?" Richard demanded, his voice trying and failing to sound in control. The rider didn't answer. He walked forward, boots echoing against the marble steps, each step louder than the last. 2 others followed, silent. Shadows carved from chrome and night. Behind the concierge desk, someone whispered, "They shouldn't be here," but they were. The lead rider's voice finally came, low and grounded. "We're looking for a little girl." "About 6. "Ran in here crying." Alicia stepped forward instinctively. "Sophia," she breathed. The man's eyes met hers, steady, kind, familiar in a way that made the noise around them fade. "She's outside," he said softly. "She's safe. She came to us." Richard's laugh was sharp and misplaced. "You're joking. You think I'm letting bikers storm my hotel?" The man turned to him unflinching. "You're Richard Carver?" Richard blinked, caught off guard by the calm in the question. "You know who I am?" "Everyone out there does now." The second rider held up a phone. A live stream blinked red across the screen, chat scrolling, comments pouring in. The city was already watching. Richard's mask of arrogance faltered for the first time. "Turn that off." "Nah," the rider said. "Truth looks better in the dark." He walked closer, standing between Alicia and the man who had made her bleed. The air thickened, the hum of the motorcycles outside rising like a heartbeat. "You laid hands on her?" the rider asked quietly. Richard's jaw set. "You have no idea who you're talking to." The rider's tone didn't rise, but something dangerous lived inside it. "Neither do you." Alicia's breath caught. The broken mop handle in her hand felt weightless now. "Step back," Richard barked, voice cracking. "I'll have you all arrested." The rider tilted his head. "You'll need to call someone who still answers when you shout." The silence that followed felt different this time. No longer fear, but alignment. Every witness in the lobby, the concierge, the bellhop, the silent guests, seemed to realize which side gravity had chosen. Richard reached for his phone. The rider moved first. A single step, a hand against his wrist. Not violent, just firm, final. "Don't," the rider said. "Not again." For a long second, nobody breathed. Then Richard tried to laugh, but it came out thin. "Do you think this changes anything?" The rider leaned closer. Everything changes when people stop looking away. Outside, through the glass doors, Sophia stood between 2 bikers holding an oversized leather jacket around her shoulders. Her small face tilted toward the lobby, eyes wide but dry. "Mama," she called softly. Alicia broke then. Not into tears, but into movement. She crossed the floor in 3 strides, past Richard's frozen stance, past the shards of glass, past the years of swallowing words. The doors opened for her. She fell to her knees, wrapping Sophia in her arms. "I'm here," she whispered. "I'm right here." The riders turned their backs to give her space. One of them, broad, quiet, kept his eyes on the building, watching the man inside who finally looked small. Inside, Richard straightened his jacket and found his reflection in the marble. The face looking back didn't resemble control anymore. It looked tired, exposed, temporary. The rider stepped back through the doorway, rain sliding off his leather like smoke. "You'll want to stay right there, Mr. Carver. Police are on their way." "You called them?" Richard hissed. The rider's voice was calm. "No, the truth did." Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, growing louder with every second. Alicia stood, one hand holding Sophia, the other still bleeding. She faced the man who had made her invisible for years and realized he was nothing more than noise. She turned toward the rider, her voice low. "Thank you." He shook his head. "Don't thank me, ma'am. Thank your daughter. She made the world listen." Rain began to fall harder, washing the night clean. Red and blue lights flashed down the avenue, chasing the sound of engines and thunder. In the glass reflection of the Starlight Grand, the chandelier still burned, but its light felt smaller now, because justice doesn't always wear a badge. Sometimes it rides on 2 wheels and stops when a child calls its name. Rain had stopped, but the city hadn't gone quiet. It never really did. Leon parked his Harley behind a shuttered mechanic's shop at the edge of the district, one of those forgotten corners, where light didn't bother visiting anymore. The neon from the diner across the street flickered through puddles, slicing his reflection into pieces. He killed the engine. Silence fell, heavy and deliberate. For a long time, he didn't move. Just sat there, hands resting on the handlebars, eyes fixed on the cracked brick wall ahead. A cigarette dangled from his lips unlit. The sound of the earlier chaos still rang somewhere deep in his skull. The screams, the sirens, the soft voice of a child saying, "Please help my mama." He'd heard pleas before, but not that one. Not from a building like the Starlight Grand. He lit the cigarette finally, flame trembling against the breeze. The smoke curled upward, ghost-like, forming and vanishing before it meant anything. From his jacket pocket, he pulled out a phone. It wasn't the same one he'd used to call the cops. This one was older, scratched, taped at the edges, like it had survived a different life. He scrolled through the contacts until he stopped at one name, HC. Leon hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen. The rain had washed the grime from his hands, but not the memories. He pressed call. A click, a breath. Then a voice, smooth, expensive, too calm for the hour. "I told you not to use this number again." Leon exhaled smoke, slow and controlled. "You said that last time, too." "You shouldn't have interfered tonight." Leon smiled faintly, though no one could see it. "You mean I shouldn't have stopped your friend from turning a cleaning woman into a punching bag?" The line went quiet for a moment. Then the voice replied, clipped. "You're not a savior, Leon. You were supposed to disappear." "Yeah," Leon murmured, staring at the cigarette's dying ember. "And yet here I am. Guess ghosts don't follow orders." "You know who Richard Carver is. You know what's at stake." Leon's jaw tightened. "I know exactly who he is." Outside, thunder rolled distantly. The kind that doesn't bring rain, just warnings. "I also know he's not untouchable anymore." The voice shifted, losing its polish for a heartbeat. "You're making a mistake. You think this was about her? About that kid?" Leon laughed softly, though it didn't sound amused. "Everything's about someone's kid sooner or later. Listen to me," the voice snapped. "Walk away, before the others start asking questions. Before they remember what you used to do for him." That made Leon still. Completely. He took the phone from his ear, stared at it as if it had betrayed him. Then, quietly, he said, "I remember just fine." He ended the call and tossed the phone into the puddle beside his boot. The screen flashed once before drowning. Inside his chest, the truth moved like an old scar aching in the rain. Richard Carver hadn't just been a name on a skyline. He'd been the reason Leon's brother never came home 8 years ago. The reason a factory burned down and the reports vanished. The reason Leon stopped wearing a badge and started wearing leather. He'd built his silence out of guilt. Until tonight. Leon looked up at the street, smoke curling around his face. Somewhere behind those towers, Alicia and her little girl were safe. For now. But Richard had friends. The kind that didn't let public humiliation go unanswered. The city hummed, alive with secrets. He flicked the cigarette into the gutter, its ember hissing out. Then he pulled a crumpled photo from his wallet. 2 young men in uniform, arms around each other, grinning under a factory sign that no longer existed. One of them was Leon. The other was someone who'd trusted the wrong man's promise. He folded the photo carefully, slid it back into his pocket, and muttered under his breath, "Debt's due." "Brother!" The Harley's engine came alive again, low and guttural. It echoed through the alley like a heartbeat finding its rhythm. As Leon rode into the night, the neon lights caught the edge of his face, half in shadow, half in something like resolve. He didn't look back at the garage or the puddle swallowing the dead phone. He just kept riding. The city stretching ahead of him like a map made of sins. Because some debts aren't paid in money. They're paid in silence. And Leon was ready to start collecting. The rain had turned into fog by dawn. Thin, gray and silent, it crawled through the alleys like a secret that didn't want to be heard. Leon parked 2 blocks from the old freight district, where the city hid its broken memories. The sign above the warehouse door was barely legible. Iron Crest Storage. It hadn't been open to the public in years. He stepped inside. Dust met him like an old friend. Stacks of metal shelves loomed in the half-light, filled with boxes marked in fading ink, numbers, years, codes. He walked between them with purpose. He didn't need directions. He'd been here before. The floor creaked under his boots. Somewhere in the dark, a drip echoed from a leaky pipe, steady as a clock counting down. He reached the back corner where the shelves thinned into shadow. Box 218B. He knelt, brushed off the grime, and pried it open. Inside were manila folders, brittle and water-stained. Each one bore a name, some crossed out, some rewritten in red. He pulled one free. The label read, "Carver Holdings, Employee Safety Violation 2017. Leon exhaled through his teeth. That year again? The fire, the lies. The report that vanished from the city archives like it had never existed. He opened the folder. Photocopies of statements, grainy photos of twisted metal. Pages stamped confidential, internal review. One line stood out. Underlined in blue, incident reported by Officer L. Morales. Case closed under directive from Executive Counsel Del Morales, his own name. For a moment, the room seemed to tilt. He remembered the night clearly, the factory engulfed, smoke turning daylight into midnight. He'd pulled 3 workers out before the roof collapsed. The 4th one never made it. His brother, Daniel. Carver's lawyers had cleaned the scene before the fire was even out, declared it an accident, paid silence to every survivor. Leon had filed a report. Weeks later, it disappeared. So did his badge. He closed the folder, breathing through the static in his chest. But then he saw something else. An envelope at the bottom of the box, newer than the rest. No label. Just a wax seal stamped with the Carver Industries crest. He tore it open. Inside was a single photograph, recent, crisp, deliberate. Richard Carver standing beside a man in a dark suit. The face was half hidden, but the eyes were unmistakable. The same eyes that had spoken to Leon over the phone hours ago. Underneath, a handwritten note. Keep it buried. You owe us your silence, Leon's jaw clenched. The fog outside pressed against the window pane, blurring the skyline like the city itself wanted to hide. He slid the photo into his pocket, then reached for his old badge lying at the bottom of the crate, still cold, still shining under layers of dust. He whispered to it, half to himself. You see, Danny? They never burned the truth. They just boxed it. The sound of footsteps broke the silence. He froze, hand instinctively moving to the small revolver tucked beneath his jacket. A figure appeared between the shelves. A woman, maybe mid-40s, trench coat, hair tied back. She held a file in one hand, flashlight in the other. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly. Leon's grip tightened. "Neither should you." The woman stepped closer, beam catching his face. Recognition flickered. "Leon Morales," he frowned. "You know me?" She nodded. "Used to. Before you went dark. I'm Detective Irene Vale, Internal Affairs." He almost laughed. "You people still exist?" "Barely," she said. "You were right about Carver. The fire, the payoffs, the missing reports. We found the same trail, then it vanished. Now he's tied to something bigger." Leon studied her for a long second. "You following me?" "Not exactly. Someone tipped us off that a certain ex-cop might start digging again." Leon's stomach sank. "Who?" The detective's eyes softened. "Someone close to him." "Someone scared!" Before Leon could respond, her radio crackled. "Detective Vale, we've got movement near the South Docks, unmarked vehicles. Looks like Carver's private security." She cursed under her breath. "They must have traced the old storage logs." Leon snapped the folder shut, grabbed the photo, and shoved it into his jacket. "Then we move! Now!" As they pushed out into the fog, the sound of engines rose in the distance. Not motorcycles this time. SUVs, armored, moving fast. Leon glanced at her. "You armed?" "Always." "Good," he said, starting the bike. "Because they don't like witnesses." The first spotlight swept across the warehouse door just as the Harley roared to life. The fog swallowed them whole as bullets cracked through the glass. They didn't stop. Not that night. Because some ghosts don't rest when they're buried. They wake when someone says their name, and when truth sleeps too long, it doesn't die. It dreams of revenge. The city never truly sleeps. It just hides its pulse under glass and concrete. By midnight, the fog had thickened into a wall. Leon and Detective Vale coasted along the service road that curved behind the freight yards, their headlights slicing brief tunnels through the gray. The Harley's engine was a steady heartbeat. The detective's breathing matched its rhythm. "Tell me again why we're running toward the docks," she said. "Because that's where the truth was buried," Leon replied. "And sometimes you dig best with headlights." Behind them, faint beams cut through the fog. Headlights, several of them, growing larger. The sound was muffled but relentless, like metal grinding against memory. Vale touched her earpiece. Static. "No signal." Leon didn't answer. He veered off the asphalt into a narrow corridor between stacked containers. The walls of steel rose around them, echoing each breath. Water dripped from chains, the scent of salt and rust mixing in the air. He stopped the bike, killed the lights. Darkness swallowed them whole. They listened. Engines passed on the other side of the yard, searching, sweeping. Floodlights crawled across the fog, turning it white for seconds at a time before moving on. Vale whispered, "They're sweeping grids. How long before they circle back?" Leon checked his watch. "Less than 5 minutes." He opened the saddlebag and pulled out the old folder, the one stamped Carver Holdings. "Everything they're chasing is in here. If we get it to a newsroom before sunrise, it's over." She studied him through the dim haze. "You sound like a man who's done running." "I've been running in circles," he said quietly. "Tonight I just picked a direction." A clatter interrupted them, metal shifting nearby. Leon froze. Vale's hand went to her holster, but he shook his head. "Not them," he murmured. "Listen." Through the stillness came another sound, a low hum, rhythmic, mechanical, a ship's engine powering up somewhere in the harbor. Cargo cranes began to move, their lights swinging like slow pendulums. Vale frowned. "That ship's not on any manifest." "Exactly," Leon said. "Carver's pulling something out before anyone can trace it." They moved along the container rows until they reached the edge of the pier. The water below glowed faintly from sodium lamps. A freighter loomed in the mist, its name painted over in fresh gray paint. A crew worked silently, loading sealed crates stamped with the same crest Leon had seen on the wax seal. Vale raised her camera. "Evidence," she whispered. Leon handed her the folder. Back up. You're not coming? He gave a small, crooked smile. If they see both of us, neither of us leaves. I'll draw the light. You run it to the paper. The detective hesitated, then nodded. You're trading one ghost for another. Maybe, he said. But ghosts make good distractions. He started the Harley again, keeping it low, the rumble barely a growl. When he turned the corner of the dock, the floodlights found him instantly. Shouts rose, sharp but distant through the fog. Vale crouched behind a stack of crates, camera clutched to her chest, watching as the beams chased the sound of the motorcycle winding between shadows. The noise bounced off steel, everywhere and nowhere at once. Over the radio, she caught fragments. Target sighted, Sector C, then static. Leon guided the bike toward the far exit, letting the fog swallow him. He didn't look back. By the time the searchlights converged on his last echo, Vale was already climbing the service ladder to the main road, the file pressed to her coat, her breath mixing with the mist. From above, the harbor looked almost peaceful, just lights flickering on water. But she could still hear the faint thrum of the Harley fading into the distance, and beneath it, the city itself seemed to whisper, someone finally moved the truth, because hunts don't always end with capture. Sometimes they end when the hunted changes the story. Dawn came in shades of gray, the kind that made the city look like a half-finished memory. Detective Irene. Vale walked fast through the glass doors of Channel 9 News, clutching the sealed folder against her chest. Her hair was damp from the fog, her coat lined with salt from the harbor. A sleepy guard buzzed her in, barely looking up from his phone. The newsroom smelled of burnt coffee and deadlines. Screens flickered across the walls. Finance, politics, weather, sports, each one talking over the other. Vale's eyes found the one desk still lit at this hour. Thomas Keene, senior producer. He looked up when she dropped the file onto his keyboard. Detective Vale, been a while since the department sent anything before breakfast. They didn't, she said. This is off record for now. Keene arched an eyebrow. That's the kind of sentence that gets people fired. Or famous, she said. Depends on who presses play. He opened the folder, scanning the pages. His smirk faded as he read. The factory reports, the missing signatures, the new photographs. Where did you get this? Vale looked toward the window. Doesn't matter. What matters is it's real. Carver's been paying silence for years. The files prove it. Keene leaned back, rubbing his chin. You're asking me to air an accusation against one of the city's biggest benefactors based on documents no one's supposed to have. That's not a story, it's a declaration of war. Then declare it, she said, before someone else writes the ending. He studied her face, the exhaustion under her eyes, the stubborn calm. Then he exhaled. Give me 10 minutes. We'll run it live on the morning feed. Once it's out, Vale nodded. 10 minutes. As Keene walked away, she stood by the window, staring at the skyline slowly waking up. From this high up, the city looked peaceful. It always did right before something cracked. The control room buzzed to life. Techs aligned feeds, adjusted audio, cued graphics. The producer's voice came over the intercom. Rolling in 5, 4. Vale watched the monitors. The anchor read the headline, Exclusive. Internal files link Carver Industries to cover-up of 2017 fire. Her pulse quickened. The first image appeared on screen, one of the old factory ruins, smoke frozen in time. Then the sound cut. Static filled every monitor. What's happening? Keene barked. Signal interference! Someone shouted. Not internal, it's coming from the uplink. The static shifted. For 3 seconds, the screen went black. Then text appeared. White on gray. Stop digging. He's still in the city. The room fell silent. Who sent that? Vale demanded. No one answered. The text scrambled, rebooting systems. Within seconds, the feed returned. But the anchor's voice was gone. Only images, muted and strange. As if the news itself had forgotten how to speak. Keene turned toward Vale. That wasn't us. She stared at the words, still burned into her vision. He's still in the city, her phone buzzed. A new message. Unknown number. You shouldn't have gone to the docks. Some ghosts don't like being seen in daylight. She locked the screen, slid the phone into her pocket, and whispered, "Leon?" Keen caught it. "The biker from the story." She didn't answer. Instead, she walked toward the elevator, each step measured, calm. "Keep that footage safe. Make backups, multiple. Where are you going?" he called. "To make sure the truth doesn't disappear again." The elevator doors closed, reflecting her face in fragmented panels of steel. Behind her, the monitors played on. Carver's smiling photo, the ruins of a factory, a single flicker of static that looked almost deliberate. Outside, the fog had lifted into morning light. Traffic moved like nothing had happened, but somewhere beneath the city's calm pulse, the signal kept repeating on a hidden frequency, an echo across private servers, back channels, abandoned towers. The same phrase appeared again and again. "He's still in the city." Vale walked down the marble steps. The folder pressed close, her mind racing through the last 12 hours. Leon's face in the fog, the missing badge, the voice on the phone. Carver wasn't hiding anymore. He was waiting. She stopped at the curb, the sun bleeding gold through the mist. Somewhere far off, a motorcycle engine turned over once, then went silent. She smiled faintly, like someone who'd just heard a secret. Because truth doesn't vanish, it just learns new frequencies. The Starlight Grand looked different in daylight. Glass that once gleamed like a promise now only mirrored the haze of the morning. Every reflection carried a fracture. Detective Vale stood at the curb, the file clutched under her arm. Her badge was hidden. She wasn't here as a cop. She was here as a witness. Leon waited by the revolving doors. No jacket, no helmet, only the quiet certainty of someone who'd already stepped too far to turn back. His eyes caught hers. A small nod passed between them. "Ready?" she asked. "Doesn't matter if I am," he replied. Truth doesn't wait for courage. They walked through the lobby together. The air smelled of disinfectant and new paint someone had tried to erase last night. Workers glanced up, then away, pretending not to remember the noise, the broken chandelier, the woman's scream. At the reception desk, a young assistant straightened nervously. "Mr. Carver isn't expecting visitors." Vale's voice was calm. "That's the point." An elevator chimed. They stepped in. The doors closed like a seal on silence. Numbers glowed one by one. 10, 21, 38, 52, 53, Leon murmured. "Top floor." He always wanted to look down on everyone. The doors opened to a corridor wrapped in glass and sunlight. No guards, no noise. Just the hum of a building that thought itself untouchable. Carver stood at the window, suit perfect, smile rehearsed. "Detective Vale, Mr. Morales, I wondered how long it would take before you came for an apology or a headline." Leon's tone was even. "We came for neither." Carver turned, hands in his pockets. "You think you understand what you found? You dug up paperwork from a dead decade. Accidents happen, detective. Factories burn. People rewrite history to feel clean." Vale set the folder on his desk. "You paid to make it burn. Then you paid silence to make it disappear." He studied her, almost amused. "And yet here you are, speaking freely. Seems my silence plan failed." Leon stepped closer. "It failed the moment a 5-year-old screamed your name." Carver's smile flickered just for an instant. "Ah, the custodian and her child. Tragic misunderstanding." "Tragedy isn't a misunderstanding," Vale said. "It's what happens when power forgets to listen." For the first time, Carver's voice lost its polish. "You think the city cares who cleaned its floors? You think it wants to hear about ashes and ghosts?" Leon's reply was quiet. "It already has. Channel 9 ran it at sunrise." Carver blinked. "Impossible." Vale nodded toward the skyline. "Every feed, every mirror building you own is playing your reflection right now." He turned to the glass. Across the city, screens on other towers shimmered with his image, news clips looping, captions scrolling. Carver Industries under investigation. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then he laughed softly, the kind of laugh that hides a crack. "So that's your justice? Embarrassment?" "No," Leon said. "Exposure." Carver faced them again, the sunlight cutting sharp lines across his face. You think sunlight kills everything. It doesn't. It just makes the stains easier to see. Vale met his gaze. Then we'll keep the lights on. The intercom on Carver's desk buzzed. A voice. Sir, the board's requesting emergency access. Investors are pulling statements. He didn't answer. He just looked past them, toward the elevator. You've started something you can't control. Leon replied. That's the first honest thing you've said. They turned to leave. Behind them, Carver's reflection fractured into dozens of small pieces across the glass, each one showing the same man, but none of them whole. As the elevator descended, Vale finally spoke. Do you think he'll fall? Leon shook his head. Not yet. Men like him don't fall, they unravel. The doors opened to the lobby. Outside, sunlight hit the marble like judgment. Workers paused, staring at their phones, whispers rising. Vale exhaled. You hear that? Leon listened. From somewhere high above, a faint crack echoed through the atrium, just glass adjusting to pressure, or maybe something breaking at last. He smiled faintly. Sounds like the truth breathing. They stepped into the light, leaving the tower to its echoes. Because glass can hide lies for years, but once it remembers how to reflect, it never forgets again. The boardroom on the 84th floor was made of glass and silence. Sunlight spilled across the table like interrogation lights, catching on silver pens and the thin steam of untouched coffee. 12 chairs, 11 filled. Carver was the 12th. He stood near the window instead of sitting, hands clasped behind his back. The city below looked distant, harmless. He preferred it that way. At the head of the table sat an older man with hair the color of frost and a voice that never needed to rise. Richard, he said, the footage has gone viral. Investors are calling from London, Dubai, Shanghai. You've turned our portfolio into a headline. Carver kept his gaze on the skyline. Temporary noise. The cycle will move on. A woman in a cream suit leaned forward. Noise doesn't make regulators reopen sealed files. You did that, he turned, calm but sharp. I handled it the way I always have. Decisively. Another voice came from the far end of the table. Decisive would have been quiet. What you gave us was visible. The speaker was half in shadow, his chair angled away from the light. No nameplate, no title. Carver's jaw tightened. You shouldn't even be here. The man smiled faintly. And yet here I am. Funny how ownership works, a hush settled. The older chairman cleared his throat. Let's keep this civil. The foundation doesn't thrive on theatrics. Carver's patience cracked just enough to show. The foundation? You mean the syndicate that pretends to be a charity? No one corrected him. They didn't have to. Silence was confirmation. The man in shadow spoke again, his tone almost kind. You are valuable, Richard, efficient. But efficiency is replaceable, especially when it forgets gratitude. Carver stepped closer to the table. You think you can cut me out after 20 years? After what I've built? The woman in the cream suit folded her hands. You built with our money, our influence, our silence. We let you believe it was yours. That was the deal. He looked around the table, scanning faces he'd once called allies, each one now a mirror reflecting his own fear. What about the fire? He asked quietly. That was your directive, not mine. The man in shadow leaned forward, eyes glinting. Careful, Richard. Memory is an expensive habit. Best not to recall what can't be proven. For the first time that morning, the sunlight dimmed behind a passing cloud. The room felt colder. The chairman spoke again, measured. Damage control is in motion. We've activated our media contacts. You will release a statement. Contrition, miscommunication, commitment to reform. Standard protocol. Carver shook his head slowly. That won't stop them. They've seen too much, the woman replied. Then make them forget. He stared at her. You still believe forgetting is possible? She smiled, polite and empty. It always has been. People remember until lunch, then they move on. Carver turned back to the window. Below, the city shimmered in heat and distance. He saw the tower's reflection stretch across the river, one clean line, no cracks visible. But in the glass, his own reflection flickered, blurred, replaced for an instant by another face. Older, colder, watching. He blinked. Gone. only his own eyes now. The man in shadow stood. "You'll take a leave of absence. Publicly voluntary. Privately permanent," Carver exhaled slowly. "And if I don't?" The man smiled again. "Then you'll remind the world how easily accidents happen." The chairman gathered the papers. "We're done." Chairs scraped softly. One by one, the board members left, their footsteps synchronized, efficient, forgettable. Carver remained by the window, the city glittering beneath him like something alive. His own reflection stared back, pale and uncertain. He whispered to it. Even kings forget. They were crowned by someone else. Far below, the river carried sunlight like liquid glass, and somewhere in its reflection, a ripple began to spread. The basement of the city archive was a labyrinth of forgotten servers. No hum, no fans. Just the faint tick of time settling into dust. Vale adjusted the small lamp clipped to her collar. Its beam cut through the dark, catching motes of air that looked almost alive. Leon followed close behind, his tablet sinking to a cold, private network. Somewhere inside these towers of gray metal slept the truth, encrypted, buried and waiting for the wrong hands to open it. "Are you sure this is legal?" he whispered. "It's archived," Vale said. "Not forbidden. They just didn't expect anyone to look." She pressed a worn keycard against an access panel. The lock clicked once, hesitated, then released with a sigh, like something relieved to finally speak. Rows of monitors blinked awake, green text crawling across black screens. Data logs, timestamps, payroll records, nothing unusual, until one folder pulsed faintly in the corner of the interface, labeled in a string of broken characters. SIN DCT 1972-2017, locked. Leon frowned. "That's not a company file format." "It isn't," Vale murmured. "It's military." She opened the folder. The screens flickered, light stuttering across their faces like a heartbeat. Inside were hundreds of sub-files, each named for a year and a single word. Harvest, eclipse, meridian, hail. That last one made her stomach twist. She clicked it. A series of reports filled the display. Corporate acquisitions, anonymous donations, sealed settlements. At first it looked like random data. Then the pattern emerged. Every donation matched a disappearance. Every acquisition followed a bankruptcy that had never been reported, and at the center of it, all Richard Carver's signature, not at the bottom of the page, but embedded in the metadata, as if he'd approved things he never meant to see. Leon's voice trembled. He wasn't the syndicate. He was their clerk. Vale leaned closer. "No, their front." She scrolled further. The line of code revealing a hidden archive. Video log 4C17. The timestamp read, October 11th, 2017, 2:43 a.m. "Play it," Leon said quietly. The image appeared grainy, filmed from a ceiling camera. A conference room, long table, 5 silhouettes. One of them, tall, silver-haired, was unmistakably Carver. He was speaking, but the audio stuttered, skipping like a scratched record. Then another figure leaned into frame, half lit by the projector's glow. The face came into focus for a second. Vale froze. It was Harrison Vale, her father, a man declared dead in a building fire 8 years ago. Her breath hitched. The lamp shook slightly in her hand. "No," she whispered. "That's not possible." Leon stared, unable to speak. The video glitched again, freezing on her father's face as his mouth formed a word they couldn't hear. Then the feed cut to black. Silence. The servers hummed back to sleep, as if the room itself wanted to forget what it had shown. Leon finally spoke. "If he's alive," Vale cut him off. "Then we're standing inside the lie he built." She pulled the drive, tucking it into her coat. The lights dimmed, reacting to some unseen power shift. From somewhere above, faint footsteps echoed through the vents, slow, deliberate. Counting the seconds between them, Leon's eyes met hers. "Someone knows we're here?" Vale didn't move. She simply said, "Then let's make sure they regret knowing first." The elevator doors groaned open behind them. spilling a column of sterile light into the dark. They stepped inside, the file drive pulsing faintly in Vale's pocket like a second heartbeat. As the doors slid shut, she whispered more to herself than to Leon. "The syndicate isn't watching from above. It's buried under our feet." And the elevator began its slow rise, carrying them toward a city that suddenly felt like someone else's design. The newsroom had been dead for years, but the computers still breathed. A slow electric sigh pulsed through the floor as Vale and Leon stepped inside, their shoes echoing against the marble like footsteps inside a memory. Old headlines still clung to the walls, yellowed pages about crashes, disappearances, unexplained fires. Leon brushed dust from a server terminal. "You sure this place still runs?" "It doesn't," Vale said, setting the drive into a port. "That's why it's perfect." The monitor flickered once, twice, then steadied into a pale blue glow. The air thickened with a static hum that made their bones feel lighter. Lines of code cascaded across the screen. Symbols, timestamps, heartbeat graphs, not data, patterns, breathing. "Almost," Leon frowned. "That's not a normal encryption sequence." Vale leaned closer. "No, it's biological. At 0.13 on the video timeline, a waveform rose like a pulse, then another, the same rhythm, exactly 60 beats per minute. And beneath the waveform, a tag appeared in white. "Ghost Protocol active." "Ghost Protocol?" Leon whispered. Vale tapped a key. The screen divided into layers. DNA strings, iris maps, neural scans, each one labeled Subject, H. Vale. She felt her stomach tighten. "It's him." The machine began to speak, its voice fractured, metallic. "Simulation integrity, 87%. Identity clone in use. Primary record sealed by order of Syndicate Board." The words hung in the air like a curse. Leon's eyes widened. "He didn't die in that fire, did he?" Vale shook her head slowly. "No, he was erased." "Rewritten." She scrolled down the archive. A list unfolded, names, locations, codes, each entry marked reinstated identity. Half of them belonged to executives Vale had seen in the syndicate files, all presumed dead. "All still active." "Jesus," Leon muttered. "They built an afterlife for the living." Vale's hands trembled slightly on the keyboard. Her father's last known timestamp blinked on the screen. October 12th, 2017, 03:05 a.m. Beneath it, a new field appeared automatically. Alias initiated. Director Ardent. She whispered the name like a question. "Ardent." Leon's face drained of color. "Vale." "That's the man who chaired Carver's foundation." Her mind reeled. The polished voice on the board meeting footage, the silhouette giving orders. The man who told Carver to vanish, it was her father. Wearing a different name. The computer emitted a low chime, a hidden window opened by itself. The cursor began to move. Without. Vale touching a key. "Access granted user. Vale Adero2." Leon took a step back. "That's not you typing." Vale's voice was barely a breath. "It's him." Text filled the screen, one line at a time, slow and deliberate. "You found the wrong grave, but the right question." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. The blue light of the monitor painted their faces ghost pale. Vale reached toward the keyboard, but before her fingers could touch it, the drive ejected itself. The monitor went black. Silence. Only the faint tick of the wall clock remained. A heartbeat that wasn't theirs. Leon whispered, "What do we do now?" Vale stared at the dead screen, her reflection hovering in its glass. For an instant, another reflection overlapped hers, an older version of the same face. Calm, watching, she blinked, and it was gone. "We keep going," she said softly. "If he's alive, he knows we're coming." From the corner of the room, one last message flickered across a secondary monitor. Faint, almost subliminal. "Welcome back, Vale, Zorsin 2," and the lights went out. Morning came without color. The sky above Meridian City was the same dull silver as the towers that reached into it. From her window, Vale watched the reflection of traffic sliding up the glass facade across the street. Every car, every passerby doubled. The city was built to echo itself. She touched the window with one finger. The glass was cold but not dead. She could feel a faint vibration beneath it, like a pulse. Somewhere inside the tower's mirrored skin, machines were breathing. Leon arrived with 2 cups of coffee and a folded tablet under his arm. "Did you sleep?" he asked. "Didn't try," she said. The lights outside blink in code. "I counted 22 patterns before dawn." He set the coffee down. "They're not lights. They're pings from the grid. The city's mapping itself." Vale turned. "Mapping what?" He hesitated. "Us." He unfolded the tablet. On its surface, a holographic map shimmered to life. Streets, intersections, districts. Each point glowed with data flow. The pattern formed a shape, 6 concentric rings connected by diagonal lines. She recognized it immediately. "The syndicate emblem." Leon nodded. "They built the city around it. Every camera, every smart mirror feeds the same hub beneath the civic tower. They called it Project Parallax, a neural network that learns from observation." Vale's eyes narrowed. "So it doesn't just watch. It thinks." He met her gaze. "And it remembers." Outside, a billboard screen flickered. For a moment, it displayed an ad for perfume. Then the image glitched, static distortion, replaced by the ghost of a man's face. "Harrison Vale." His lips moved soundlessly. Then the message came through the building's intercom instead, as if the whole block were exhaling his words. "If you can see this, you're already inside the mirror." The sound rippled down the avenue. Pedestrians didn't react. Their earbuds blocked it, or maybe they were used to voices that weren't theirs. Leon's voice trembled. "That's not a live feed. It's part of the infrastructure." Vale stared out the window, every pane now showing faint afterimages of her own reflection multiplied across the city. Hundreds of her, standing in silence. She whispered, "He turned the city into his memory." Leon adjusted the tablet, scanning frequencies. He encoded himself into the grid. That's what Ghost Protocol was for. It wasn't about survival. It was about omnipresence. A low hum filled the air. The building lights flickered once. For an instant, Vale's reflection on the window didn't move when she did. She froze. "Leon, look." Her mirrored self blinked a half-second late. Then it smiled, softly, knowingly. The hum stopped. The reflection aligned again. Leon whispered, "It's responding to you." She forced herself to look away. "Or testing me." They stepped outside. The street shimmered under a haze of heat and glass. Every storefront reflected the opposite one. People moved like ghosts between layers of themselves. A bus rumbled past, its windows filled with faint distortions, faces repeating, overlapping, dissolving. Vale noticed something else. Every pedestrian wore the same reflective glasses, their lenses mirror-bright. Each passerby seemed faceless, only eyes of silver. Leon's breath caught. "Those are the new city frames, AR glasses. Government issue." Vale reached into her pocket and pulled out the drive marked Vale Dahu. Its light pulsed in sync with the street lamps. She whispered, "They're not lenses. They're transmitters." A vendor nearby turned slightly, the mirrored glasses flashing her own reflection back at her. Behind that reflection, for just a second, she thought she saw her father's silhouette. The air around her seemed to thrum, subtle, rhythmic, almost like breath. Leon muttered, "We're standing inside a nervous system." Vale looked up at the skyline. The towers gleamed under the pale light, their surfaces smooth, perfect. "Merciless," she said quietly, "in a city made of mirrors. You never see the truth, only what someone wants you to." And in her reflection far above, another Vale turned away first. The city went quiet after midnight. Not silent, just quiet in that strange, electric way a machine pauses when it's listening. Vale sat alone in her apartment. The lights were off, but the windows still glowed faintly from the towers outside. She had stopped checking her phone hours ago. Every notification was blank. The drive marked Vale 02 lay on the table. Its LED flickered irregularly, like it was breathing through a dream. Leon had left earlier to trace the signal path. promising to call if he found anything. She didn't expect him to. The hum started near the kitchen window, soft, barely there. Then another tone joined it, from the mirror over the sink, a second voice, and another from the dark TV screen. They weren't words yet, just syllables wrapped in static, climbing in pitch until they aligned into something almost human. Vale, she froze. Vale, listen, the voice was hers. Not recorded, not imitated, hers, but detached, hollow. She stood, heart beating fast, scanning the room. The reflections moved just a breath too slow. Each pane of glass held her image. But they weren't synchronized anymore. One blinked late, another tilted its head when she didn't. She whispered, "What are you?" The reflections answered in chorus. Her own tone splintered into a dozen echoes. "We're you." The ones left behind each time you turned away. The lights from the city flared briefly, painting the apartment in liquid silver. Every surface came alive, the glass table, the microwave door, even the sheen of the floor tiles. Her face, multiplied 100 times, all speaking softly, almost kindly. "You asked to know who built the mirrors?" "You did?" Vale shook her head. "No, I didn't create this. Not this city," one reflection said, its smile faint. "This self." Her knees weakened. She steadied herself on the table. Static rippled through the room, followed by another voice. Lower, calmer, her father's voice. "Don't look away when truth looks back." It was a sentence he'd said to her once, long ago, when she was a child tracing constellations on his office window. She hadn't remembered it until now. Tears blurred her vision. "Dad?" she whispered. No answer, only her reflection staring with quiet sympathy. "He's not the ghost," they said in unison. "You are." Her breath caught. The city outside pulsed in time with her heartbeat. The glass seemed to draw closer. "You were copied, Vale. When he disappeared, your mind was archived. Your memories replayed to keep the grid aware." She stepped back, shaking her head. "No, that's not possible. I'm real." The mirror by the door flickered. Her reflection stayed still, eyes glowing faintly silver. Real enough to remember. Synthetic enough to forget. The drive on the table blinked again, once, twice, and then every reflection moved together, mouths forming a single word. "Return." The lights cut out. When power returned seconds later, the windows were blank again. Only one reflection remained. Hers, steady, silent. Vale stared at it. It stared back with an expression she didn't recognize. Something older, wiser and faintly sad. Then it spoke once more, softer than breath. "He built the mirrors so you'd find yourself. Now look closer." She leaned in, inside the depth of her own eyes. She saw it. The faint outline of code flowing beneath the iris. Like circuitry catching the glow of the city, outside. Thunder rolled through the towers. The air shimmered. And for the first time, Vale realized the grid wasn't observing her anymore. It was waiting for her to decide who she wanted to be. Dawn didn't break. It seeped, slow, pale, deliberate, sliding down the glass ribs of Meridian. City like light learning to walk again. Vale met Leon on the roof of a parking structure across from the Civic Tower. The tower's mirrored skin held the sunrise like a held breath. The whole skyline was an echo waiting to decide what it wanted to be. "You hear it?" Leon asked. She listened. Beneath the early traffic and air vents, there was another rhythm, a faint harmonic thrum that matched her pulse. The drive labeled Vale's Out 2 warmed in her palm as if answering a question she hadn't spoken aloud. "It's synced," she said. "Not to the city. To me. The mirror network trains on identity," Leon replied, laying a folded schematic on the hood of his bike. "It predicts before it spies. If you step in, you can step through. Write, not just read. And if I write the wrong thing," he held her gaze, "then the city remembers the wrong you." Wind skimmed the rooftop. Far below, a bus turned the corner and every window on its side glinted in the same instant, like a school of fish pivoting underwater. She saw her face in each pane, steady, composed, older than the night before. "Show me the core," she said. They crossed a pedestrian bridge to the Civic Tower. No alarms, no guards, only the soft dignity of municipal design. In the atrium, the sculpture of bent steel and glass reflected motion into fragments. A security kiosk blinked green at the sight of Vale. The building knew her before she spoke. "You're sure this is legal?" she asked, more to measure her own voice than to solicit reassurance. "It's public infrastructure," Leon said. "They just forgot to tell the public what it does." Elevators parted. They rode down past parking and sublevels into a chamber that felt pre-war and post-everything at once: concrete, cable trays, a ring of inactive displays. At the center stood a column of mirrored panels stacked like vertebrae, a spinal cord for the city. The column woke when Vale stepped near. Panels breathed to life in concentric pulses. The air cooled. For a moment, all of Meridian seemed to inhale. A line of text slid across the nearest panel. "Welcome back. Vale 02 prediction. Engine, primed authoring rights conditional," Leon whispered. "They left you a door. Or a test." She set the drive in the console. The system read her like a diary. Iris patterns, cadence, micro-tremors of hand and jaw. Screens populated with images that didn't feel like images at all. Memories surfaced as if from inside her sternum. The factory fire that had taken a badge and given her the habit of sleeping in daylight. A window traced in constellations with her father's pen. A girlhood argument about truth and kindness where she learned that sometimes the kind thing hurts and the true thing heals later. Vale. Leon's voice was close. "Before you begin, choose your exit. Write it on the wall of your head." She almost smiled. "You always talk like that?" "Only when the floor might move." She faced the column. "System," she said, and the chamber answered with a tone like glass touched by a finger. "Open authoring protocol. Authoring requires source. Select memory set options" bloomed around her. Curated days she had not curated. Phrases she had spoken once now cataloged as if they were songs: trust, loss, threshold, mercy, her. Fingertips hovered over a threshold. The panel warmed. The network poured. Her own life back into her, accelerated, annotated, corrected. She felt the temptation to accept the version that featured fewer edges, fewer refusals. The algorithm offered kindness without demand, justice without mess, endings that landed with cinematic coherence. "No," she said softly. "We're not here for immaculate." She scrolled past the offered edits and found the raw captures. Grain. Breath. The tremble at the end of a sentence said to no one in an empty kitchen. The laugh that surprised her at a funeral because the story being told was true enough to hold both tenderness and ache. "Take these," she said. "The parts that don't audition." Confirmed source. Uncurated impact domain. She glanced at Leon. He nodded once. "Citywide reflections," she answered. "Every pane that remembers. Every lens that insists." The column dimmed toward a color she could not name. A shade between mercy and mourning. In her ear, a voice arrived that wasn't in the room, wasn't on the net, and wasn't fully alive in the way bodies are. It belonged to someone who had taught her how to trace Orion backward, who had turned out the lights and said, "Learn your eyes in the dark." Harrison Vale. Every rebellion begins with remembering who you were before they told you. Her throat tightened, but she didn't close her eyes. "And if remembering cost me the version of me you saved?" Silence, then. "Savings are for people who expect to leave. You came to stay." Leon laid 2 fingers on the column, grounding them both. "He's not asking you to disappear," he said. "He's asking if you'll stop outsourcing your reflection." Vale inhaled, exhaled. She found the line between fear that keeps you safe and fear that keeps you small, and stepped to the far side of it. "Initiate cascade," she said. "Authoring active. Right function." She spoke slowly, as if engraving each verb on the column itself. "Replace prediction with recall. Replace surveillance with consent. Replace profiles with permission. Render mirrors honest." The floor vibrated, gently at first, then with a widening insistence. Above them, Meridian's glass began to change tone. Storefronts lost their sheen of certainty. Office windows shed curated silhouettes. On buses and trams, city frames flickered, then asked their wearers a question instead of supplying an answer. Do you want to be seen or known? On a corner, a boy chasing a ball past a bakery caught his own face in the display case and didn't wince for the first time. In a hospital, a nurse paused at an elevator and saw the exhaustion she had honored instead of the efficiency she had been graded on. In a courtroom lobby, a defendant met his reflection and found not a composite of priors, but the singularity of a frightened man breathing anyway. Screens downtown rolled to black, then to gray, then to something like a mirror that refused to lie. Leon whispered, "Look." Across the river, the tower where the board had framed itself as permanence went dim, one story at a time, the way a theater falls to hush before the lights rise in a different place. Vale stood still inside the hum of the cascade. It moved like weather, like rain reversing direction. The mirror network didn't go dark. It went honest. Predictions bled into confession. The city stopped guessing and started listening. And then, the decision the system had hidden at the bottom of the authoring stack surfaced like a last page: to free others, archive author, retain, or release. Leon's hand found her shoulder. You don't owe them your disappearance. She thought of Sophia saying, "Please help my mama," of Alicia holding the jacket like a borrowed future, of 1,000 quiet workers whose names the mirrors had used to polish themselves. If I stay archived, she said, the network will always default to me. Their faces will calibrate against mine. And if you release, then it calibrates against consent, she answered. Not a person. A promise. She didn't look at the ceiling or the floor or Leon. She looked into the panel and saw nothing but a surface capable of learning. Release, she said, confirmed our author set. Ephemeral city rights distributed. Sound exited the room. For a heartbeat, Meridian forgot its own noise. Then people began talking, not to cameras, not to feeds, to one another. Laughter jumped. Apologies happened out loud. The air recalibrated. On rooftops, on trains, in doorways, citizens lifted city frames from their faces and saw themselves naked of the system's expectation. Some cried and didn't hide it. Some smiled and didn't pose. Some did nothing at all, which might have been the bravest choice, to allow a moment to be only itself. The column cooled under Vale's palm. It no longer knew her name. It didn't need to. Did we win? Leon asked. There isn't a scoreboard, she said. Only breath. They rode the elevator up. On the street, glass looked less like judgment and more like weather. A woman took a picture and didn't post it. A man deleted a draft apology and spoke it to the person beside him instead. A kid traced Orion on a bus window with a finger and got it wrong and laughed and kept tracing until it was right enough to be his. The city forgot her name, but it remembered how to breathe. If this made you feel something worth keeping, stay with us. There's more truth where breath begins. The city woke without alarms. No drones humming. No feeds whispering headlines before sunrise. Just the hush of wind sliding between towers that now reflected the real sky instead of someone's version of it. From a cafe window near the river, Leon watched morning unfold in monochrome. Not absence of color, just gentleness. Steam rose from his cup like a slow exhale, tracing the air before fading into light. He carried a small recorder, the kind journalists once used before everything became instantaneous. He pressed record, static, then his voice, soft, worn, steady. Her name was Vale. The city didn't build her. It only learned to remember because she refused to forget. He paused, watching a bus glide past the window, no ads on its side anymore, only mirrored panels that showed faces as they were, tired, curious, alive. A woman on the street helped an old man pick up a spilled bag of oranges. No one filmed it. They just laughed. After the cascade, Leon continued, there was no signal, no feed, no predictive thread. For a week, people thought the silence was a glitch. Then they realized it was permission. He leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. Somewhere across the river, the civic tower still stood, stripped of its pulse, now a skeleton of glass. At sunset, it caught the sky's reflection and nothing else. They called it the Vale Spire now. She said once, he whispered. That honesty is just clarity without vanity. The city took that to heart. Even the mirrors forgot how to flatter. The barista switched off the radio. No noise, no curated playlist, just the sound of spoons, footsteps, the world reclaiming its texture. Outside, a boy chased a paper boat along the gutter. It drifted past puddles, past reflections that now held no code, only sky. He didn't look up. He didn't need to. Leon stopped the recorder. Rewound, pressed play. Her voice came through, faint but alive, embedded from an old message left in the archives. If remembering hurts, keep doing it. Pain is proof the truth is touching you. He smiled. The tape clicked. A waitress passed by, wiping the counter. Who was she? She asked. Leon looked up for a heartbeat. The morning light caught the side of his face, the tired lines, the small piece. She was a reflection that chose to become a person, he said. Now she's everywhere light touches. Outside, the river mirrored the new sun. For the first time, its surface held no advertisement, no algorithm, no mask, only movement. Imperfect and free. Leon turned off the recorder. He didn't need it anymore. The city breathed, quietly, as if practicing the art of existing without permission. Somewhere between sky and glass, a faint shimmer lingered. Not surveillance, not code, just memory, bending toward light. And when the wind passed through the towers, it almost sounded like her voice, steady, human, at peace. We are what remains when the mirror finally looks away. Some stories don't need miracles, just one person brave enough to say, that's enough, Vale did, and maybe tonight, you, sitting alone with a glowing screen, are learning to do the same. If you still believe kindness isn't extinct, if you still think a city made of glass can learn to breathe, then don't let this story vanish like another scroll. This channel doesn't have neon lights or sponsors. It's built by broke souls still foolish enough to tell the stories no one pays to. Here, if you felt a heartbeat in these words, leave a small mark, a comment, a subscribe, a whisper that says, I'm still here, because sometimes one tiny clicky's how people writing in the dark remember they still exist. End on silence. Just the sound of wind brushing past buildings, like a breath, like a promise that the story isn't over yet.